Prejudice and discrimination are terms that are very relevant today, and they're often used together, but in fact they mean two very different things. So the first place we'll start is to learn the difference between these two terms. Prejudice refers to negative attitudes that someone has about particular members of a social group. So someone who has racist ideas, someone who has homophobic ideas, someone who thinks negatively of people of different religions. All of those are prejudices because they're negative attitudes. Discrimination refers to treating someone differently because of a negative attitude towards a member of a social group. So discrimination is an action. It's when you actually treat people differently. There's some other differences between prejudice and discrimination. Some psychologists argue that prejudice is actually a common part of humanity because we prejudge things before we get all the information. But most people will argue that discrimination is not universal and is not a good thing. It's not good to treat people differently because of some characteristic. So prejudice and discrimination, researched by many psychologists, also researched by some other people. And you will want to know the research of Jane Elliot, who was actually a second-grade teacher. She was really horrified by a lot of the racism that she was seeing and a lot of the prejudice and discrimination she was seeing. So she wanted to teach her second-grade class about these topics, and she did a little mini experiment to help them understand. So she actually created prejudice because of eye color. The first time she did it, I believe she said that children with blue eyes were better than children with brown eyes. Now remember, these are second graders, so they have a tendency to believe what teachers tell them, and they have a much more simplistic view of the world than we do. So after some fights, not all of them were immediately on board, but after some discussion, she used some examples of people with blue eyes who are great and people with brown eyes that weren't to convince the kids that blue-eyed people indeed are better than brown-eyed people. And what she saw was horrifying, but not all that surprising. Not only did the children who were deemed less capable, the brown-eyed children in this scenario, they performed worse on tests. They started withdrawing. But also, the children who were viewed as superior, in this case the blue-eyed children, started bullying the brown-eyed kids and saying horrible things to them and treating them very meanly. So you had violence break out. I believe there was fights that broke out. So it's not difficult to teach children to be prejudiced, and yet it happens all the time. She actually proved the point even more when she flipped the eye color. She then changed it to where actually it's the brown-eyed people who are better, it's the blue-eyed people who are inferior, and the results flipped. Now the blue-eyed people did worse, and the brown-eyed people became the bullies. She actually had a debriefing with the children afterwards and told them what this was about and told them that she was just showing them that it's not okay to treat people differently because of some characteristic. And most of the students left the experience claiming that it actually opened their eyes to prejudice and discrimination. So you'll want to know what those terms mean, how they're different, and you'll also want to be familiar with Elliot's research in the classroom and why it is important.